Welcome to another edition of Coffee with Tom and Joanne. I'm Joanne Taranto.
And I'm Tom Matthews, and today we're going to talk about writing an offer and the strategy behind it. And this is a continuation of our buyer onboarding with the Tom and Joanne team. So Joanne, we've gone through all this pricing, and now we're going to talk about writing an offer. What tools do we use for writing an offer?
We love that there's more than just price to an offer. There are terms, and we need to talk about the terms because if you can be flexible on terms, if you can give the terms that the seller wants, maybe your offer looks a little bit more attractive. So we're going to start talking about, now that we know what we want to offer, how do we want to present that in the paperwork?
Right.
So I think the first thing that you can consider is what's included or excluded when you're looking at an offer. So we just recently sold a home that we have a buyer pending on it, where it was important for the seller to be able to leave behind some of the things that were in the house because they had already moved out, but left behind some pieces for staging. And so there's some furniture, there are some, yard tools, useful things. But it could be garbage in some sense. Like it could, people could have a shed full of garbage. Are you willing to take on some of that stuff and maybe offer to dispose of it for the seller so that they don't have to go back and move it? So inclusions and exclusions are part of the terms. Then we can talk about, going back to money.
Right.
What things can we play around with in the offer as far as money goes?
So you have the initial deposit. So in Massachusetts, we're a dual contract state. We have an offer and a purchase and sale. And so with the offer, sometimes people say, $500 or $1,000 is what we put up. Well, what if you put up $2,500 or $5,000? Really show really show the seller that as a buyer, you're committed to the deal. Because once you start putting money up, that money goes into escrow. It does become part of your down payment, but it's also at risk until you close. And so saying to a seller, I'm maybe potentially willing to put some $5,000 at risk to show you I'm committed. Because the biggest fear a seller might have is that they accept an offer from you, and then you wake up, it's a gray day, and you decide you don't want to buy the house.
Arbitrarily walk away.
Walk away. And if you have $500 up, most people will walk away from $500 if you're buying a $700,000 house.
Right.
But most people don't want to walk away from $5,000, and the seller knows that.
Yep.
And it can make your offer stronger, even though you're not increasing the price. So we're talking about ways to kind of manage that transaction. The other thing is that the purchase and sale. Typically, we do 5% of the purchase and sale. Again, it becomes part of your down payment. But maybe you put 7%. Maybe you shift that a little bit. But I'm ahead of myself.
Yeah.
Between the offer and the purchase and sale in Massachusetts, we have a home inspection. Typically anywhere from 3 to 10 days afterwards. So Joanne, what can you do with that home inspection clause?
Yeah. So we have a home inspection would be what we call a contingency.
Yes.
And so if you wanted to have a home inspection, you would add a home inspection contingency. Now, there are a few different ways that you can present something like this. So the first is you can waive your right to have a home inspection. It's not something that we recommend. We have done it with buyers. You would need to acknowledge that you are waiving your right to a home inspection. And so that's the first piece. The second piece is that we put that contingency into place. So how can we frame it up?
Right.
And we love the Greater Boston Real Estate Board's contingency page because it allows you to put in an aggregate of defects that you might find. And what that means is I want to buy your house. I understand that this is not new construction and that there are going to be things that come up on an inspection here. And I'm willing to take on $10,000 of work, $20,000 of work, $50,000 of work. Or I'm willing to take it on, but I'm doing the inspection for structural purposes or safety purposes. So there are a lot of ways that you can craft a home inspection contingency that shows the seller your level of seriousness.
Yes.
If you put on that you're willing to take on no aggregate of defects, that says to the seller, I'm going to do a home inspection and then I'm going to renegotiate the deal afterwards. If you really want to have that inspection and you put a high threshold there, you could also denote things that are already present. We recently, a couple of weeks ago, had a buyer client that was looking at an antique home. The antique home had knob and tube wiring. They still wanted to do the home inspection, but we were able to separate out that knob and tube and define it as a non-negotiable in the transaction.
Right.
So it gave the seller some, some feeling of solidity that you were intending to buy the house and that you were looking at it with your eyes open and understand that this home needs work. But that particular project is a big ticket item.
Right.
And so by taking that big ticket item off of the table for an inspection, it gives the seller a little bit more faith that you are going to do the right thing and not try and renegotiate after a home inspection.
Right. Now, if something comes up, say you have a $10,000 threshold,
Yeah.
and just say like, we didn't get up in the attic because it was a little scuttle hole and I couldn't fit. Or
Yeah.
Joanne and I couldn't fit up in the hole.
Yeah.
And the home inspector gets up there and they find black mold, or
Yep.
they found rafters that were cut,
Yeah.
and just find issues that
The roof is
the
leaking.
roof is leaking. There
Yeah.
was just no way of knowing that. That's
Yeah.
why you have a home inspection.
Yes.
Now you have three options. The first option is you can get professionals in to get you some pricing
Mm-hmm.
to see what it's going to cost to fix this.
Mm-hmm.
If that cost comes up, and again, aggregate. So maybe you found some stuff in the basement that you didn't know about. So now the aggregate is over that $10,000 threshold. You can withdraw from the home
Yep.
purchase process
Yep.
because you don't want to do the work. You don't want
Right.
to take on the projects. You can get your money. That $5,000 can be refunded to you.
Mhm.
The only money you're out is the home inspection.
Mhm.
Second thing you can do is you can say to the seller, hey, I didn't know about this. You probably didn't know about
Yeah.
this. I still want to buy your house. Can we work together?
Yeah.
Can you give me a closing cost credit?
Yeah.
Can you reduce the price? Can you fix this before closing?
Yeah.
And you can start having a discussion. Oftentimes we find most sellers are not bad people. They want to sell you a good home.
They do, and they have pride in their
And
home.
they have pride. If you find an unexpected issue, most home sellers will either correct it, credit you, or change the price.
Right.
And that's what we find. That's what we find in our experience. And so there's no reason, if you're committed to the process, that you should have to walk away from a deal. And it just happened to Joanne and I. We had a home inspection on a house with a high threshold, like 20 grand.
Mm-hmm.
And the home inspector was in a part of the room on the second floor. And he's like, whoa, this floor is bouncy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was identified that a wall was taken down like 30 years before below that room.
Mm-hmm.
And they never put a support beam in. So everyone was like, whoa, this is a shock. And the seller was willing to compensate the buyer so they could move forward
Yep.
because it was unexpected.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that process. But now you've gotten past the home inspection. What's next?
Yep.
So the next process is the purchase and sale. And who's involved in that process, Joanne?
The purchase and sale is your attorney is going to run point on the purchase and sale. And that we take a little bit of a back seat during the purchase and sale process. But on the offer, signing your purchase and sale sooner rather than later is another way that you can put advisable terms into your offer. So you've written an offer, you've written a really strong home inspection contingency or waived your inspection contingency. Now you're moving on to the dates because we're going to iron out all the dates in the transaction. So maybe for this seller, they have to move in on a certain day or they need extra time. There are lots of things that we can do with the dates. So it's typically advisable to go into a purchase and sale as quickly as possible. So that can be anywhere from 3 days after the offer, if there's no inspection, to up to about 14 days if you're going to have an inspection. And then we're going to have the other contingency that is oftentimes on offers is for financing.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the financing contingency, putting the dates attractively, doing it as quickly as possible. So applying for your mortgage as soon as possible, having a strong down payment and displaying that in your mortgage contingency it is great, but also having a very strong pre-approval or pre-commitment letter.
Yeah, and we can talk about this more in another series, but a pre-commitment letter is what we want to have all our buyers do. And what that is you commit to a lender before you find a house. You give them all of your documentation, just like you would to get a loan, and they pre-commit you. So they saves you 10 days on the front side. And now your loan is only subject to an appraisal. And what we want with that is because then you can do a commitment and have a commitment date. So it's just subject to an appraisal. You can only ask for like 10 days or 7 days. And then you have your financing secure. We do not recommend waiving your financing contingency. Obviously, we've been in a position where we've had to do that because the market's been so competitive, but it is not our first choice. That is something that's only done with buyers that are very, very well qualified, who've gone through pre-commitment, have a strong down payment, typically more than 20%, and typically have a family member behind them that if we run into an issue, they have support.
Mhm.
Because we do not want to lose any buyer's money when we put it up in escrow.
Mhm.
And knock on wood, haven't so far, because we take the processes and we do these steps. And we also, one of the biggest concerns people have is the appraisal.
Mhm.
And because we've done all of our due diligence leading into this video, we rarely have any issues with
Yep.
appraisals.
So the last part of the offer is the closing date, and it's advisable to know when the seller wants to close. That's a way that you can make your offer more attractive. But if you're not able to be flexible on their terms, you need to decide what is the best time for you to be closing on this home. And that wraps up writing an offer.
It's a great exercise, and we can definitely talk about more, but what we're going to talk about in our next video is our Tuesday check-ins and
Mhm.
how the Tuesday check-in applies to your home buying process. So thank you again. If you love our content, please subscribe and check out our other videos. But I'm Tom Matthews.
And I'm Joanne Taranto. Cheers.